In this video, I'm going to show you how to place your rear brakes, pads, and rotors on this Toyota Highlander. They're located right behind your rear wheel, so we'll have to pull that off to do this job. Let's install these TRQ brakes. Using a 21mm socket, remove all 5 of your lug nuts and remove the wheel. With the wheel off from the backside, you'll see the two 14mm caliper slider bolts. These hold the caliper onto the bracket. Use a wrench and break them free. They shouldn't be extremely tight. With them broken free, you can remove both of them, set them aside. With the help of a small pry bar, you can squish the piston of the caliper in just a little bit through this opening. This will allow you to more easily remove the caliper off of the brake pads. Take that caliper out, and I like to put it up on top of the upper control arm so it does not pull or put any pressure on the brake hose. These pads need to come out next. You can pry them out, or if they're loose enough, you can just slide them out. Next, you have two 17mm bolts that hold the caliper bracket onto the knuckle. Break those free. Remove them the rest of the way. Remove the caliper bracket and set it aside so we can clean it. Next, you need to remove the rotor. This one is not stuck. Sometimes they get stuck on the hub here. Also, the parking brake shoes can also make it stuck. If your parking brake is engaged, of course, you're going to want to disengage it so that this rotor can be freed up. So make sure that you chalk off your front wheels if you're on the ground on jack and jack stands. Wiggle this off until it's removed. I'm going to clean all of this with brake parts cleaner, mostly to get brake dust off and to be able to better inspect the parking brake shoes, which you have to do when you remove this rotor. Since we're putting a new one on, we want to make sure that the adjuster is going to adjust. Everything is nice and lubricated and everything will function properly. Things look great here, but I do want to clean them off. What I also have to do next is clean up this hub surface. It is not in horrible condition, but it is a little corroded. Now, I don't have to sand this down. It's not as bad, so I will just take a wire wheel on a drill and clean it up. Doesn't have to look perfect, but it does have to look a little bit better than this. Basically, what you want is a flat surface for the rotor to mount on. If there's raised areas from rust or debris, it'll sit at an angle even though you can't see it, and that's going to affect the brakes. Before I coat this hub with an anti-corrosive coating, in my case anti-seize, I'm going to take the new rotor, put it on, and just adjust everything so that the anti-seize doesn't get all over this while I'm working. Then we'll take it back off and anti-seize the face of the hub here. Basically what we're after is the adjuster here. We want to make sure the parking brake shoes are set right so they can grab properly onto the new rotor. However, before completely sliding this on, we do have to degrease it, clean it, because there are oils on this from the factory so it doesn't rust while it's on the shelf. Having said that, take brake parts cleaner and a rag and degrease the parking brake shoe surface as well as the brake pad braking surface. Once that's done on the inside, flip it over, slide it on. Looks like they're already slightly over adjusted because I can't push it on easily. So that's a clue here, but we will clean off the outside of the braking surface while we're at it. So back to adjusting. Clearly this is over adjusted. This would not be good to run like this, so I'm going to pull this back off and loosen up the shoes a little bit. And that means spinning this adjuster wheel to push the shoes back together. In my case, I have to push down on it. That's going to get them a little closer together. Now, a small adjustment here will make a big difference in the end, so just go little by little. Now that we've adjusted, put the rotor back on. That's better. However, I believe I made it a little bit too loose now because I can't even hear them touch. So I'm going to take it back off and tighten them back up just a little. I can hear them touch a little bit. If you spin this, keep in mind the entire rear end will spin because this is all-wheel drive, but you should be able to hear them just barely touching here. That's the noise you're looking for. Might go one more turn here, but that's it. If you over tighten these, what happens is they will drag, they will overheat, they can lock up on you, but regardless, they will wear down prematurely. Perfect. So let's take this back off. What I like to use here is anti-seize, some high temp anti-seize. Use a thin layer, coat the whole surface of the hub. If you're using a spray type anti-seize, try not to get it on the parking brake shoes, as well as the lug studs. If you get it on any of that, you're going to have to clean it off. Having said that, you want just a thin layer on here, otherwise it will squish out when the rotor goes on, and it'll get onto the parking brake surface, and that's what you want to avoid. Perfect. This is nicely coated, so let's take the rotor and slide it on for the last time. You'll notice the rotor has a few different holes here. These two are for an 8x125 bolt, so you can put it in and pull the rotor off in case it's seized. But this one is actually so you can adjust the parking brake shoes with the rotor on. Unfortunately, my old rotor did not have the boot on here. They're supposed to have a rubber cap. If yours has it, transfer it over because water can get in through here. Like I said, unfortunately mine did not have this, so I'm just gonna have to leave it open. But if yours had it, put it on. Here's our Caliper bracket on my workbench here so I can clean it and make sure it's ready to reinstall. I'm gonna take off the anti-rattle clips first. Sometimes you have to pry these, sometimes they come off a little bit easier. Regardless, we're gonna install new ones. So get these off. With this open like this, we're gonna have to clean the area where they sit. You wanna make sure that it's rust free. Doesn't have to look perfect, but it can't be swollen with rust, otherwise the pads will get squished in between the top and the bottom if that's the case. I'm gonna take a wire brush and clean it out. I'm actually gonna flip it over like this so that it's easier to clean, but mine isn't in horrible condition. A lot of times if it's rotted, you might have to sand it down with a sanding disc. Looks like this one isn't too bad. Spraying some brake parts cleaner on it can help minimize the dust as you clean. That looks good right there. I'm going to take a thin layer of grease. This is silicone paste that is rated for brakes, so it's rated for high temperature. If you have brake grease, that's fine too. Whatever you use, you want to make sure it's not going to melt with the heat of the brakes. Just put a thin layer on both of the areas that we cleaned. This will prevent corrosion from building up in the future and, well, basically prevent the pads from being stuck here. If you put too much, it will squeeze. Inside here is where the rotor rides, and you want to avoid that. You don't want grease on your rotor. Next, we have to install the new anti-rattle clips. This is what they all will look like. They have this spring with a hook on one side. The hook will go towards the outside of the caliper with the spring towards the base of it where it mounts. If you put it on backwards, it won't fit because the rotor will go in the middle here and you can't put the hook there. So slide them on all the way down. They should slide on smoothly. If they don't, that means you likely need to clean up some more or you have the wrong anti-rattle clip. Having said that, this side is good, so do the same exact thing over here. With that done, we have to clean up the slider pins. I'm going to do these one at a time so that they go back into the hole they came out of. One of these two will have a rubber bushing, and you want to make sure that that one goes exactly where it came from. To do this, all you have to do is twist and pull. Hopefully yours are not seized. Sometimes that happens if these boots are torn or swollen. These are in good condition, so you want to make sure you check yours, and if needed, replace them. These pins are looking very good here. They're not rusty. They have clean grease on them still. This is the one with the bushing. The other one will just be a solid metal pin. Having said that, I'm not concerned about cleaning in here because I have good grease already. If yours was rusty or had a lot of old cakey grease, you're going to want to take a bore brush, take the boot off, and clean inside there. I'm going to stick some of the same silicone paste in the boot. This will act as a reserve of grease as the brakes operate. The rest I'm just going to put on the pin. You can't put too much on the pin because it'll get wiped off by the boot as it goes in. So just a thin layer on here. You also want to get some in this lip up there where the boot seals up. Stick it into the boot or into the bore and press it all the way in. With this pin pressed in, if there's air, squish the boot and all the air should come out. Give it a couple twists and let's do the same to the other side pin. Inspect the boot on this one as well. This is the one that does not have rubber bushing on it, it's just a straight pin. Wipe it off and let's lubricate it. Get that pin in there, press it, squish the boot, get all the excess air out. Wipe off any excess grease that may have leaked out. And this caliper bracket is ready to be installed on the vehicle. Grab your caliper bracket, slide it over the rotor, have a bolt ready to start it on. That way it can stay secured. I'm just going to thread this on by hand as much as I can. Start on the second one. Let's bottom these out. The torque for both of these is going to be 70 foot-pounds. All right, both are torqued. These pads are going to have some wear indicators installed on them. I'm going to put them on the bottom here so that as the brake rotor spins, it'll push the wear indicator into the pad. If it's on the top, it could break it off as it pulls it away from the pad. Having said that, take your inboard pad or outboard pad, whichever one, it doesn't matter. They both end up getting a wear indicator on them. And once you've established which one is the bottom and the top of your pad, take the wear indicator, hook it onto the inboard side of the pad, and then snap it over. This is what it should look like when you're done. Once you do this on both, we can install the pads, put them in at a slight angle first. This is just to push these springs out of the way. Once you've pushed them out of the way, kind of fold the pad in, push it in. This should slide easily. It should not be stuck. It should not take a ton of force to get this on here. Do the same to the outer pad. Perfect. There we go. Pads are installed. They move around smoothly. Next, we have to compress the piston of the caliper to make space for the newer, thicker pads. So remove the bleeder screw cap. You might not necessarily have to do this. I prefer to do it just so I can cycle the brake fluid through. So when I squeeze the piston, fluid's going to come out of here, and I'm going to top off the master cylinder with new fluid. Having said that, break this free with a 10mm wrench. This shouldn't be very tight. Next, I have a caliper depression tool. If you have something else that will work, go ahead and use that. I have a collection bucket ready to catch all of the fluid that's coming out. And with this tool, I'm just going to gently squeeze in on the caliper piston. That's completely bottomed out. This went in really smoothly. If yours went in with difficulty, most likely it's a seized caliper piston and you're going to need a new caliper. I'm going to give this a second to get some fresh brake fluid out through the bleeder screw and not air. I don't want to have any air trapped in the system. We're good here. Looks like just a steady trickle of clean fluid. So I'm going to close this off once again with a 10mm wrench. Just snug it, and that should be good enough. You don't need to tighten this a lot. Before I mount the caliper, I'm going to clean the brake fluid off of it. Use brake parts cleaner and just spray it all down. Don't forget about the bleeder screw cap if your vehicle had one. Hopefully it still did. Now take your caliper, put it over the pads and the caliper bracket. Once this is lined up, install the 2 bolts that hold the caliper onto the slider pins. Bottom them out, and the torque for these is 20 foot-pounds. If you have to hold the slider pin because it's spinning as you turn this bolt, you can either use pliers on this ridge here on the outer part. Just be very careful not to pinch or damage the boot. If you have a thin wrench, a 14mm thin wall wrench will fit in there. That's 1. And 2. At this point, do the same to the other side, and let's put the wheels on. Let's get the wheel on. Start on all 5 of your lug nuts in a cross pattern, bottom them out, and also in a cross pattern, torque them to 76 foot-pounds. .76 foot-pounds in a cross pattern. Here we go. Double check them. Now that you've done the same to the other side, top off the master cylinder, pump up the brake pedal, and take it for a road test.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.